would he be? No, but I mean, actually, let's not be too hyperbolic. It wouldn't be the worst in the world. He'd certainly be better than President Bush.
He'd certainly be better than anyone else on the Republican side this past election cycle. Knowing him, I was proud, and I don't get proud of anything Donald Trump says very often these days, but I was proud of the fact that he did come out against the law in North Carolina. He would not be the worst thing. The thing that scares me, to be completely honest with you, is who the hell knows what he's going to say from one day to the next? Who the hell knows what he's going to do tomorrow? I believe, knowing him, that if he appointed Supreme Court justices who believed exactly what he believes, then he would support pro-life justices, he would support justices who overturn Citizens United, he would support justices who would support the LGBT community. But I don't know if he's acting on what he thinks is right or on what his base is going to be happiest about. And that really, I've always believed is what, and I think she's doing it to some degree, I think is what Hillary should really focus on almost more, is that it's off topic, but there's complete instability there. And
it's Politicon, nothing's off topic.
By the way, he got his list of who he's going to choose for the Supreme Court from the Heritage Club. So he's not going to pick any of those people. He's not going to pick any of the Heritage Foundation. He's not going to pick people that even believe what he in his own group believes. He's going to farm it out to people who are the worst actors on the Republican side, even further down the road. These guys are this close to the Phelps fan.
Very exciting times, guys. Very exciting times. I want you all, we're going to do some Q&A. I want you all to be thinking about your Q's. If it's not a question, I will shut you up. I will shut you down. It's not one of your questions. That's all I'm saying. So we might, we're going to make this happen. Kasey, I want you to get in on this first.
Yeah, comment on where do I start? I think he emboldens the bullies, right? He emboldens in that way, there is something hyper-masculine about being that bully, right? He really emboldens the bullies. And I think that he caters to, we know if you just look at the polling, and Hillary's toughest crowd are going to be like poorly educated white men. He caters to them. And he caters to them by keeping them poorly educated, right? And so I think in terms of the work I do around advancing LGBT rights, like we advance these rights by educating people. And he is invested in keeping people not educated and really catering to the lowest common denominator, keeping things very simple. And so ultimately, I think that's not helpful in the long term. I tend to agree that we don't know where he's going to be, right? Hopefully we'll never find out, like he would be like as president, my personal political beliefs. We don't know where he's going to be. I don't think he'd necessarily be horrible and everything. There's certainly far worse candidates out there, but I think at a meta level, what is most damaging about him is that he perpetuates what is exactly the problem in this country right now in political discussion and trying to advance serious issues that affect real people.
That's bullies. Okay, who has a question? All right, there's a mic over there. Sorry, I should have warned you. Go line up behind the mic. I'm a lefty. I love lines. Go. Uh-oh.
Mike?
Let's try again. You can just start by shouting. Can you do that?
I was going to say, as a community, we're diverse and we promote tolerance and inclusiveness. How do we as a community include those people who do support Trump? And as a community, why is there so much animosity towards those in our community who have a different view on gun control, on immigration, on abortion? How do we include those people in our community to be inclusive and to be tolerant?
I think we have to recognize that a lot of people in the LGBT community are one-issue voters. I've been a one-issue voter for a while. I mean, maybe not as much anymore, but I have at times in my life been a one-issue voter. And we have to recognize that even though some people may be one-issue voters, a lot of other people are not. And it is an issue. It is a problem. I think a lot of people are angry, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being angry about LGBT rights. And when you get really angry, of course, you believe that if you're not with us, you're against us. And I think I don't know that I have an answer, by the way. I'm sort of agreeing with what you say, and I think it's very difficult when you see someone who agrees with everything else, with you on so many issues, but is supporting someone who would not be supportive of the group, and feel like those people may may be causing harm to our cause by electing someone who, even though you may agree with them on everything else, would make you a second-class citizen. And I think that's the concern that I have about it. You are not wrong, though. We do have to do a better job, and I didn't answer your question.
It's a complicated question. It's a lovely answer. Oh, that. I want to make sure we have a lot of questions. It's a lovely answer. At least asking the question and listening seems like a really lovely start. So, yes.
So I think I have kind of the inverse question. And I'm just asking this question because I know that's. So I thought it was interesting you said, well, how is Donald Trump on LGBT rights and he's not the worst? And my question is, how do we stop looking at LGBT rights in terms of just what would someone be just on LGBT specific issues, because we are a community of immigrants and we are a community of people of color and we are a community of women and a community of working people, and I don't think that, I mean, I have to say personally, I don't feel much unity with someone who's a Trump supporter, personally, but I understand there are other folks who might. But I'm just curious, how do we resolve that? Because if we're including the Trump people, we might be not, including some other folks.
Very interesting. Kind of a statement with a question.
I'm sorry, that statement
I
was
agree
again.
with the statement, so I'm going to let it slide. Moderator privilege.
As the token peripheral on the state, in reality, I can only speak as kind of somebody who's viewing it from the outside as far as a movement goes, as much as my involvement is. And I've seen everything from bonded movements at Aiken walks and DVD signings. We have a first vote where people are, across it. Like, there's everybody there. And then, when we were shooting First Vote, we shot this one big episode, and we had a lot of extras on it. And one of the girls who played a lesbian on the show was in that particular scene. It was at basically the men's club, that we don't have. And a lot of the extras were saying there should be no fish on the show. There should be no women at all at the show. And there should be no gay people not working on the show. And not knowing that I was straight. They were just talking in front of me in that regard. And I was like, this might be 12% of why the issue hasn't moved forward before now. It's that little hamstring. It's not the entire reason, but it might be part of it. So that support is incredibly important. And so the outreach has to be, unfortunately, the weight of being a progressive, the weight of being a liberal will always be heavier than being a conservative, because conservative is exclusatory. And progressive, you've got to do the extra weird work of, shit, I'm not on board with this person for a lot of stuff, but they're a human being, and maybe they feel this way because they're scared shitless. So even though they're acting like an asshole right now, maybe there's something worth having there. And because that's what we're expecting of the other side. That's what we're looking for in how they treat trans people and people of color. We want them to go, take a step back, recognize them as human beings. And yet we've got a reticence to do that ourselves sometimes because of the political opposition, because they really do act like assholes. That's the work of it, I would say. That's the only...
I think sometimes it's possible to be so open-minded that you just close around to the other side. And that we become so open-minded about accepting every single person. My first boyfriend was that way, some bitch. And he accepted every single person, but he hated Christians. But he hated Christians because some of them discriminated. So we have to be, I'm just putting that.
Yeah. Well, it's a good reminder. Everybody go out, find the humanity in the Trump supporter.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
It's not that hard, I know. It's just happened to me, but I do it all the time.
I'm Rachel. Thanks so much to the panelists. It's been really interesting. I really liked what Kasey said about gun control and Islamophobia has become a really central part of the discussion, but I also worry that we're going to lose sight of the equality issues that are at the center of all this. As we're looking into the movement to invigorate it, I loved what Brianna was saying about intersectionality and complexity. So what is the
And so my question is...
Yeah.
All right.
My question is, what is the mantra and the message that you think we should be behind? If it's not love, since it's not same-sex marriage anymore, what is our message and what is our unity?
Check your privilege.
that's why I want to constantly check their privilege.
Strand, can I ask you a follow-up question?
Sure.
Because arguably, not even that hard to argue here, that political correctness, or recently conversations about privilege, college classes and college mark, whatever, cross culture, has been what's driven some of the backlash in general and the rise of Trump in specific. It's a sort of a, whoa, it's going too far, or you're making me feel guilty because I'm white and straight, or how do you, is that just an inevitable backlash?
I think it's an inevitable backlash for people who are married to this idea of identity being black and white. And I think what we're trying to do is, again, elevate the conversation to understand all the different pronouns that we're using nowadays. Again, when I do a lot of trainings with employers, and often what I get is, all these added labels, all these added pronouns. They're not added, it's the evolution of humanity. It's about stepping it up. It's about understanding that we are far more diverse, far more complex than this binary idea. And so it's challenging people to take it to the next level, to understand people on a deeper level. And I think some people are resistant to that. They think it's doing extra work, but it's not. It's about evolving.
Yeah, well, okay, go ahead.
Firstly, my name is Eleanor, so it was really weird when you did that. I'm not Eleanor. I
Oh,
thought
sorry.
you were saying my name. It's cool though. It's actually really cool.
What's your question, Eleanor?
So I've always been a local politics kind of person, and a lot of why I got into politics was because, like, in about 8th grade, I was like, politics is stupid, whatever. And I was like, oh wait, I'm gay. I kind of gotta be interested in politics because, like, they could like pass a law that kills me, right? But now I'm interested in local politics, and California is kind of like eat. Like, I don't know what more we can do. I don't know what I should get behind. I feel like California, in terms of LGBT rights, has kind of hit the point where it's like,
Check your privilege. Because there are 29 states in the country that at least haven't gotten there. And if you want to be involved, figure out a way to be involved with them. Figure out a way to make sure that you recognize that California, say it again.
Okay, check your privilege.
I want to get Kasey on this.
Well, yeah, in a really concrete way. There's a number of national LGBT organizations, mine included, Freedom for All Americans, that look to people in places like California to help us advance things in other states, right? Like, so we have
pilot programs.
Yeah, we have phone bank programs where you can get on the phones from your house in California and connect to voters in North Carolina and help them connect to their lawmakers. Like, it takes an incredible amount of work to actually get people to call their lawmakers. And if they're living in a community where they're actually like really struggling with, can I hold a job? Am I safe in my house? Am I safe in public spaces? It's very hard to get them on the phone, right? We actually need people from states where you've got a lot of privilege, a lot of comfort to get on the phone and help us do that. So I would encourage you to look at national organizations, look at mine. There are definitely opportunities for people in places like California to get involved in all
And you
places.
don't
And there's always more you can do here, right?
And you don't even have to
go
go
here, LA.
Go further in California.
Yeah.
This is why the right goes and passes extremist laws in certain states to be months. I'm gonna try to make sure I get everybody in the rules.
Along similar lines, actually, I was wondering if you knew in this coming election, in any of these states where there might be a scary bill, anti-LGBT, can help look out for, like another ballot. Is there anything coming up in this
I
election?
don't think there are any referendums anymore. I don't think there are any referendums this year. I think it's really about making sure that you know who the lawmakers are that are being elected.
Yeah.
Because I believe, and people, again, it might not be popular, but I believe that a lot of people who are being voted in are not even doing it because they believe that Trump's not saying he says because he believes it. They're doing it because it's politically expedient for them. So making sure that you kind of really research.
Yeah. Get involved with those local elections. Or run. Yes.
Hi, this question's going to echo a lot of those things, but being a little bit more specific. So my question is specifically with LGBT asylum and the immigration process that's going on right now. I actually work in an organization that focuses on that. But within the LGBTQ community, I feel like there's been maybe a lack of awareness. We talk about how a lot of trans rights, but kind of do you think that immigration is such a decisive issue that perhaps the immigration factor itself is like silencing a lot of these narratives, especially the treatment
But really, especially when we're talking about trans people, we're running away from countries where we're being murdered simply for being ourselves. So it's not that we want to leave our countries, it's that we're forced to. And I think that it's about humanizing who an immigrant identity is, who an immigrant person is. I'm an immigrant. I immigrated to the States and not legally and was able to work towards legal immigration status. But for me, politics and for me, even being here feels a little strange because I've always felt so disenfranchised by politics. It never reflected me. It never was something that I felt I could be a part of. And I think that that's also part of it, that it feels very exclusionary. It feels very classist. And so I think that, it's about humanizing immigrants and immigrant issues.
And I'll piggyback on that. I actually think, there's a number of issues, but I would highlight issues. And it is just really damn hard to have the American public be able to think of more than one thing at a time. So when it was marriage, it sucked up all the oxygen in the room, not just on trans stuff, but on everything, right? Now there's an increasing focus on non-discrimination stuff. I work on that, that's great. I think it's a really important issue, it will save lives, but there are so many other issues. I think that's part of the problem. And then there's another problem, which is, what you said, there's the demonizing of immigrants and all that, and which our community does too, right? Actually so before I was a Free for All Americans, I ran a statewide LGBT organization in Massachusetts, where you would expect people to be very progressive. We were years beyond marriage, and I was working so hard just to get our own community to be on board with working on immigration issues for LGBTQ people, caring about racial profiling because of all the queer profiling that happens, and because racial profiling obviously impacts LGBT people directly, or people of color. All of that's so hard to bring our own community along. So I just want to make sure we own a little bit that some of the challenge we have with advancing some of these issues is that our own community is filled with people who aren't quite on board with this.
There's also, and this is almost kind of goes back to what she was asking about too, is that in terms of the Trevor Project and the Children of the Night, there's a bunch of groups that work with homeless LGBT youth who've been kicked out of their homes because their family's full of bigots and whatnot. You may not have had that issue, and that's a wonderful thing. This is maybe the way that you pay back. I'm dead serious. You may or may not. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, one of the also, yeah, that's right here in LA. Same thing with HRC's national there in DC mostly, but they're also out here. AIDS Project Los Angeles, Project Angel Food. These are all organizations I work with. There's a senior housing project in Hollywood. We did the groundbreaking. Bobby Gant and I from Universe Folk were there and worked with the developers to actually make that happen. So there's opportunities for that. And when it comes to, I think, the trans issue I think it's time to classify trans people as political refugees, specifically. That be an allowance or a specific spec, because most people who are fleeing, like you said, are fleeing because it's dangerous where they are. And but they're almost treated as if they're any group of immigrants. They're in kind of, and it is different. It is less safe. It is for them. And so that might be one of the next big stage political movements on a as far as a bill or a classification. I know this White House would be open to that.
I think that's a great idea. Of course, trans people aren't protected in America.
Right. I understand it.
Come here!
I understand it, I get it. But they are more so than certainly the places to flee.
Everybody's doing a great job asking questions. Here's what we're going to do, because we're almost out of time, is the next 4 of you get to ask questions.
Yeah.
And then everybody will get some quick closing thoughts. So pile them in. Yeah, that's all. That's one of you standing. Yeah, go ahead.
What's your opinion on the role of LGBT sexuality identification in the sense that should we allow people to register their sexuality through statistics and stuff like that? The next sense is, should you mark if you're asexual, gay, lesbian? On one hand, it improves the understanding in a social environment. On the other hand, some people consider that deep violation of the privacy because they're keeping it.
Very interesting. Good question. Okay, hold on. We're hanging on to it. Let's get to the other 3 questions, and we're all going to thank you. It was a great question.
Okay, this is actually sort of a longer question.
Oh, God.
But it's requires a shorter answer. But okay, so the governor of North Carolina, when the bathroom bill was passed, sorry for saying bathroom bill.
That's okay. Just get it.
The governor was interviewed by Mark Levin on Michael Savage's radio station, and the governor didn't really seem to care about the public's opinion on the bill. It was more of just his own opinion. So, Mr. Clay, do you think that the people in North Carolina, do you think that they would fight back against the bill enough to maybe prevent even it being blown even more out of proportion, or even just so that the bill would be repealed?
Okay, so hold on. You got that? Okay, good question. Next two.
So the short version of my question is that I recently just moved back from the UK where I was working because my visa renewal was time. And in my search for a job here, I was seriously worried about being discriminated against and not offered a job because I'm atheist. And that's not a problem in Britain here, it's actually a decent sized problem nowadays, where my own family was far more accepting of my brother coming out as gay than me coming out as an atheist. So my question to this panel would be, do you have any advice to the atheist community about how to bring together such a disparate group of people who have so many conflicting views to come together and work towards their own rights and equality?
Oh, okay. Not sure we can quite tackle it, but it's someone will answer. Okay, last question. Good one. It's an interesting one.
Well, we don't have Rachel now.
But I'm her lesser evil twin. Go ahead. Yes, that's fine. That's fine.
You said you can marry on Sunday and get fired on Monday. Considering next year we might have a progressive Supreme Court for the first time since the 1960s, do you think it's realistic we can put a case against discrimination against the LGBT community? How realistic is it? Do it, fight for it?
Okay, we got 4 questions, 4 panelists. Everybody in like 30 seconds. Take a stab at whatever you felt like taking a stab at. God, this has been beautiful. Yeah, go ahead.
We can certainly have a Supreme Court case that elevated gender identity and sexual orientation to a protected class, which they did not do when they did the marriage bill. So I think certainly, I don't know if there's a specific case, but that could happen. To the question about North Carolina, you know, the problem, and you're right, it was a long one, so I don't know if I remembered it all. Pat McCrory is weak. Pat McCrory is not as conservative as he came across in some of these interviews. He is controlled by an incredibly conservative General Assembly that has a super veto, a gerrymander the hell out of the state, and a super majority that they can override his vetoes. And I think he has just decided to go ahead and jump all in the pond and get the shit all over him, because why the hell not? To answer your question about being repealed in a quick way, you know, I don't think it's going to be repealed. I think it's going to be overturned by the courts. The Fourth Circuit's already done it to some degree with the case about a transgender boy in the bathroom. So I think it's going to go. But the problem with repealing any of these things, and this keep short, is that the percentage of people who are gay, lesbian, transgender, the percentage of people who are affected by that law directly is so small that unless, I mean, people aren't don't rise up against things unless it affects them themselves, you know. And so I worry about that. Obviously, we do have a lot of great allies who will support, but I think we're going to overturn it in the courts relatively soon. But I don't think we're going to overturn it politically in that state.
Yeah, that's an excellent example of a slightly too long answer.
You know, a couple of things on that. So I think when we're talking about the bathroom issue, and it was interesting to hear that individuals say that it didn't reflect the community, that, you know, when they asked sort of the people on the ground whether they agreed with this bill, that they, you know, kind of weren't in agreement. When you look at youth communities, especially Generation Z, 13 to 20-year-olds, their world is gender variant, gender neutral, gender non-conforming. And so for youth, it's a non-issue. It's the parents, it's a certain demographic that is still stuck on this idea that, you know, if you potentially are somebody who may have a penis, and that's really what it comes down to, it's all about genitalia, then you are dangerous. But youth are beyond that. They are already embracing diversity in even incredible ways. And so I think we're also talking about a generational gap there. And so I hope that that is something that, you know, can evolve and change over time as well.
Mr. Sparks, quickly.
I guess to some degree to our atheist friend, I think it's something we learned from what Clay was mentioning as far as building bonds and having a friend who was a Christian and feeling like he was close around that idea. There are actually religious people who understand at least the base of the protection of religious diversity in the country. And so maybe the outreach is, look, I don't believe what you believe, but I'm not going to call you a Bronze Age moron right now. With a bunch of my friends on some asshole atheist site. But so that we understand that everybody has the right, it's why we don't have prayer in schools. It's not that everybody would be welcome to pray if they want to, but if we have 2,000 religions in this country, if we start praying every religion, we'd never fucking get through, like, it'd be Church of Satan by recess, and we'd never even get through the goat. So, and I think to some degree, this might answer, as far as multiple genders or the gender answer on the census. The census is less interested in our identities on a personal level and just kind of on genitalia. Like, because it's how they track uterus cancer and prostate cancer and shit like that. They honestly, when you get down to it, if you're a trans man who still maintains certain organs, it's those organs that will define your certain health aspects. That's where that mostly lies. It's not about who you know you are. That shouldn't be the government's purview almost any time.
It's an interesting conversation because also, census matters in terms of.
Well, I think that's a different. I think that's a different category.
But it's worth
Beyond
being
gender.
concerned about.
I'll take the opposite. That was the question I was going to take. I'll actually take the opposite view. I think 1,000 times yes. Like, the government should be collecting this data. It should be voluntary. People don't have to disclose it. It's voluntary now on a lot of demographics, but absolutely we should be tracking it. And it's not just the census, right? There are violence surveys. There are all kinds of surveys around youth. It tells us so much, not just about how many of us there are, which we have no flipping idea really how many of us there are, but it also tells us so much about, what our households look like. What is our income? Where do we live? All the kinds of things that we actually need to know to do two things. One, to truly understand as a community what are the things we should be working to do to improve our lot. And two, because right now, in some ways, we're making some guesses, some educated guesses, but guesses. And two, it gives us real data. And I do legislative advocacy, and lawmakers want data. They don't want to know, we think there's 33,000 transgender people in Massachusetts. They want to know the number. They want to know, how many people have faced, discrimination in a public place. They want those actual numbers. That kind of stuff will give us those numbers.
It would be very, identity in themselves is constructed, may vary by class, part of the country, whatever, but it would be very interesting if suddenly the mainstream gay and lesbian organizations were confronted with, data that said, oh, look, most of the LGBT community in this country are working class. And now, what's your gender identity? With that, everybody join me in thanking the fantastic